All right, Akash, let's jump right in. You have one of the most interesting backgrounds of anybody that I've interviewed. You got your master's at Harvard, then you went to law school, then you were a law professor. You also now are a finance professor. You've started a startup. You did a project with the DoD. You've worked at the Fed. You've done all sorts of these awesome things. But my favorite thing that you've done is your blog. And you're an excellent writer, which to me means you're an excellent thinker. And you distill things down. I wish I could read that thing all day, but we're going to distill down just some of the favorite things that I've come across, as well as what you think most people get wrong and what they should know about finance and about frameworks and about personal development and business. So let's jump into first, why is external validation sometimes a good thing?
The way I think about external validation is that it's a price signal from the market. Anybody who's been in finance for a while, if you have a private asset, let's say I own a restaurant or I made an investment in my friend's startup and there's no stock market for it, how do I know what that's worth? I have an internal sense of what I think it's worth. I may be able to look at the metrics and judge what I think it is worth, but I'm prey to my own biases. And external validation, I think, is super important for people that have a lot of negative self-talk. So imagine that you are an investor in a startup and all you can see is what's wrong. For example, I'm not an eloquent speaker. I'm not a great writer. I'm not good at math. Whatever the negative self-talk, we all have it. And if that is the only audience that we listen to, we're going to have a very warped sense of what we're worth in the market. And when I say in the market, I don't necessarily mean the job market. I just mean anything that we can do in life. So what I like about external validation, and I want to just offer people this frame, is that if somebody comes along and pays us an unsolicited compliment, that is the equivalent of an investor coming along in the market and saying that this private investment that you own, I would like to buy it.
Right, which is like, as I was reading that blog post, I put it in my newsletter. I literally changed my mind about what I think about external validation as I was reading it, which is such a powerful thing in itself. And I really resonate with this idea of like, oh, you know, nothing necessarily in isolation is great or bad, but if my self-talk sometimes can be critical, and that is the signal or the price signal as you frame it, it's like probably good to get some other signals out there.
Absolutely. It's like having a doctor give you a second opinion, for example.
Right.
On something as like a critical medical procedure. Even if you trust your doctor, a lot of times doesn't hurt to get a second opinion.
Right. But it's especially true if your doctor, you know, didn't go to med school and is like really cynical. And that could just be our own self-talk, right?
Absolutely.
For you, have you always thought this, or have you changed your mind about this external validation?
This was a realization that I had. And so you mentioned that I teach as a professor. I never would have considered doing this had people not told me that, hey, you'd be a really good professor. I used to give talks in DC on mortgage finance when I worked at the Fed. I was a mortgage-backed securities trader there. And so occasionally I'd give these like finance lectures to political people on how does the mortgage-backed securities market work. And I think I had a talent or a gift or whatever you want to call it for taking these complicated things and distilling them into ways that people can understand it. And so people would come up to me afterwards and say, hey, you should be a professor. Never, ever considered doing that. And absent that external feedback, I probably never would have tried.
Yeah. So one of my other takeaways that I'm realizing here, and that like people watching this can realize for themselves, I like to think it was like, what is the smallest unit of action, or like what's the actual tangible takeaway? And to me, it might be a little meta, but the smallest unit of action is to do things to get more feedback, right?
Totally.
If the only talk that you have is just your self-talk, you're not putting yourself out there enough, whether it's writing blog posts or actually how you and I met at the Austin Writers Club, 7 a.m. every Friday morning. We're just kind of having these interesting conversations. And then
Literally the best.
Yeah, which is awesome. It's like the highlight of my week. We've had some awesome conversations. And then you were a huge part in pushing me to do this. And then I saw your blog and I was like, oh, wait a minute. This whole external validation thing is the exact thing that I needed to hear, because I do this, for AppSumo and for other, like consult for other companies. But the thing I have been procrastinating on is my own thing. And what did you tell me?
Like, you got to do this. Like, do it now. I'll support you.
Right, right. And then, you offered to be a guest as well. And so it's like it's not the first time I've heard that, but it was the right message for me at the right time.
Yeah.
And so for anyone listening to this, takeaway might just be like, people might hear, go do more things, but it's like, get more feedback in
Get
different
more
ways.
feedback. Yeah.